Hey, this is the World Advice Channel too. What I want to talk about today is the topic of how was Africa like before slavery. So for this video, I will explain how Africa was like before slavery, so anyone can understand it, as I will explain this in a simple and straightforward way, as well as a logical way, so it's actually believable and not full of exaggerations and so on and so forth. So now that I mention that, let's get started. So when it comes to the topic of how Africa was like before slavery, let's be honest, when you say that, pretty much people are focusing on how advanced they were as a civilization. I would definitely say when it comes to how advanced they were, it would say they were moderately advanced. Okay. Now, the truth of the matter is, what I mean by moderately advanced, I mean, if I could give a comparison, since so much of African history has been destroyed and been covered up, it would probably have been as advanced as maybe a Polynesian civilization or something, if I could make a good comparison. Because the truth of the matter is, when it comes to Africa, and stuff, as well as the fact that there's been archaeological evidence and stuff that have shown that there's cultures that existed before the slavery happened, whether the transatlantic slave trade or, of course, the Arab slave trade, which happened before um, the European slave trade, you actually find that there's actually evidence of civilizations that existed before them, like the Nox civilization and a few other ones like the Great Ghana civilization and so on and so forth, who, even though they might not have been as advanced as Rome, let's be honest, I don't think that would have happened, since for most of African history, they've been pretty much isolated anyway from the rest of the world. Pretty much, at least, have been isolated from the rest of the world, so there wouldn't have been like a Rome or something, but there was some degree of advancement, in all honesty, when it comes to it. Which the Nox civilizations, were a civilization that used to create these sculptures of these large heads, and I believe they used to also put head sculptures on top of each other to make these large sculptures, kind of in a way similar to the sculptures that Polynesians made, especially the ones in Easter Island, something kind of like that, in a sense. That's what they used to do, and to create something like that, especially with how large they used to be, there's no if, ands, or buts. You would have had to have a pretty advanced civilization to do that. Maybe not extremely advanced, but fairly advanced. People who just live in a society where the smallest, the biggest settlement, more like, is just simply a village of mud huts with a few hundred individuals could not accomplish something like that. That would have required something more advanced. So the truth of the matter is, there definitely were. So yeah, like I was saying before, when it comes to a settlement or something, of a few hundred individuals, they wouldn't have been able to create something of that sophistication, you know, as well as the fact that there's obviously ruins of the Great Ghana civilization that existed before, of course, even the Arab slave trade. So the truth of the matter is, there definitely were civilizations that existed in West Africa, especially when you take in consideration that there were so much people who were taken into slavery, you know, in the first place. There, anyone who uses common sense when it comes to understanding the history of the world would know that for as many people to have been taken into slavery as they were taken into, you would have had to have some degree of civilization to exist. Hunter gatherer civilizations are very small. I mean, hunter gatherer places that are made up of hunter gatherers only, in terms of population, are extremely small and can, over the span of an area, literally the size of maybe an area like sub-Saharan Africa, if all of them are hunter gatherers, it would be roughly about 1 million people. You know, so the truth of the matter is how much Africa had at the time. Even during the slave trade. Common sense would indicate that there had to have been some degree of civilization for them to have as many people, for them to have been abducted and, of course, sent to the New World they were, as they were, of course, sent there. So the truth of the matter is, truth be told, to answer your question, no. Um, no if, ands, or buts. Um, there were civilizations that existed there, and they're fairly advanced and very similar to, from what I have seen, to like Polynesian civilizations, like very naturalistic, very obsessed with nature and animals and the spirit realm, and like ancestor worship and all that type of stuff. And they were quite nice and quite pleasant on average as a whole as people when you actually went there. And they had small settlements and even of course larger cities that paid tribute to these smaller settlements paid tribute to these larger cities. That's pretty much how it's like there, if anything. And they're very artistic and very interested in the arts and stuff like that, whether it could be artwork or music and all that type of stuff. So that is how it was like for, of course, Africa. I'm not going to claim that there was some magnificent, civilizations that existed. There was Nubia, to be fair, though, absolutely, which was an advanced civilization. But outside of Nubia and sub-Saharan Africa, most of them were fairly advanced, maybe had cities of a few tens of thousands of people at the most, but it was fairly advanced. It was not as bad as people make it out to be. These racist people who just say, oh, there were extremely small settlements of a few hundred people at the most, and then blah, 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 blah. That's actually a complete lie and is simply um, bullshit, to answer your question. But, but at the same time, I'm not going to make exaggerations, but at the same time, I'm not going to downplay the success. There were civilizations that existed full of tens of thousands of people. Just infighting and drama is what created a situation that we, of course, have now, of course, in the Black community, and of course, even in Africa, of course, no surprise, specifically for Black Africans, to be honest with you. So that's the truth of the matter. So that's my first point. And if there's a lesson to be learned, or I should say more like a message to answer your question, is that the truth of the matter is when it comes to Black people, you know, is that we're not stupid. To answer your question, we are just as capable of doing things that everyone else in the world does. We are not stupid. We are not dumb. We are not any of those things, which obviously I think a lot of Black people who look up videos like this would want to look up something like this, not just out of curiosity, but just simply because, of course, for this specific, of course, reason. We're not stupid. To answer your question, we have the ability to learn things and remember that information and build up on that information from previously before. That is the truth of the matter. Is like any other group of people on the face of the planet. We're not stupid at all. It's just more ignorance and backwards belief systems and stuff. That is why we do not see success like the way we see things, in all honesty, to be quite honest with you. Okay. And that is the truth of the matter. It's just infighting. That's really about it, aside from the other point I made previously, which is just bullshit. It's just infighting is why we didn't see the success we see. So please don't believe this shit that some of these white Europeans say, because at the end of the day, all this stuff happened was just simply it happened because there were rivalries between different city states and tribes and so on and so forth. And of course, one thing led to another, and of course, it got as bad as it did. And and it didn't help that the belief system that a lot of those tribes had was that let's use let's you know use captured POWs as prisoners of as slaves, which they actually created that system because they thought it was more humane than actually just straight up killing people. And that is all that what happened. There's nothing more to it or nothing less to it than that. We're not stupid. We're not anything less. It just simply a belief system that was not a very good one or a smart one for that matter, uh, was taken advantage of by Europeans, and Europeans just spread a huge propaganda campaign to make us believe that we're dumber than we actually are. In the end of the day, we're not any dumber than any other group of people. We're the same as other groups of people. We're not any less. It's just simply a mistake our ancestors made. And that's really all it is in the end of the day. So if you wanted to get an answer to that question, uh answer to this question more. Like, I hope you got the answer to your question, because that's all it is in the end of the day. There's nothing more to it or less to it than that. It was fair. We're not dumber than anyone else in the world. So anyway, this is my video. All I have to say is that I hope you enjoyed it. And just remember, if you like this video and videos like this, remember to thumbs this video up and hit the subscribe button. And this is all I have to say. And simply put it, I'm out. So bye.